Hey everyone, this is Jen and you're watching BPD Woman. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the origins of where black and white thinking comes from, and I'm going to give you tips on how to break black and white thinking and give you some examples of how it shows up in your day-to-day life, and then give you some examples of what it looks like when you are thinking in that gray zone or that gray scale. If you haven't done so already, please like, share, subscribe. On this channel, I offer you positive, solution-based approaches to recovery for those of you dealing and living with BPD, CPTSD, or those of you who are emotionally or highly sensitive or become easily dysregulated. If you're a family member or friend, there is a playlist just for you entitled Vids for the Family, so please check that out. And while I am not a therapist or a social worker, I can answer one question that none of those folks cannot, which is, what's it like to have BPD? And in doing so and giving you the nuances of living with the disorder, as well as going through about 6 rounds of DBT, doing in-person work, group work, book work, one-on-one therapy, group therapy, you get it. I'm very committed. I can help you navigate a road to recovery because it is possible. So let's talk about the origins of black and white thinking. I want you to think about children, and I want you to think about how children perceive the world. I want you to think about their states of development, how mature they are, how able they are to think in terms of grays, okay? Let me share an example with you. I walk a woman's dog, and she has a very young next door neighbor, a child. And one day the mom, a couple times actually, the mom and the small boy, he's probably, I would say, no more than 2 or 3, they came out, and he always has a lot of questions for me about what I'm there doing with the dog. And so he would say, "Hey, who are you?" And I'm like, "Well, I am Rex's dog walker." And they would say, "But what happens when Miss Susie gets home?" And I said, "Well, I help Miss Susie." And he'll kind of stand there and be a little bit confused and not really kind of, get what I'm saying. And like his mom will try to explain it. And so kids have a very structured view of the world, very rigid, right? Like if you ever given a kid a sandwich, but he'll only or she'll only eat it if the crusts are cut off, right? Or maybe they'll only eat a few certain meals and that's it, and they won't try new things, right? So the kids have very structured views. They have very rigid views. They know one status quo to be true, and they have a very hard time incorporating or learning things that are out of the status quo, right? Because the world is very narrow. They don't drive, they don't socialize in huge amounts, right? They don't know tons of people. Their worldview is pretty narrowed. And as you get older, your parents, they begin to teach you things. They begin to emotionally nurture you. They begin to nurture, how you perceive the world. They help you put, grayscale thinking together, right? That, Miss Susie is Rex's mama, but Miss Susie also hires Miss Jen to walk Mr. Rex, right? And that those two things can be true. And as parents nurture their children and they grow up to see more of things in a grayscale, they perceive the world in a very non-linear, fluid type of way, that many different things can be possible. That just because someone's mad at them, it doesn't mean that they hate them. Just because someone's not talking to them right now doesn't mean that they're never going to talk to them again. And so this is where we get stuck. If you are not being nurtured, or if you are being neglected, or if you're being abused, or if your family life is very chaotic, or if it's hammered home to you as a child that your opinions don't matter, if you're gaslighted, if you're told that, no, that didn't happen, you can't even trust your perception, and no one takes the time to help you see the world, then guess what happens? You get stuck in that childlike black and white thinking. Now, this is my opinion. This is what I have observed over the last, 40 years of being alive, of the last 20 years of being diagnosed, is that if you are only learning how to survive your environment, you don't really have a lot of time for all of that emotional maturity that comes with growing up, right? The understanding of feelings, the processing of feelings, how to ask for something, knowing what object constancy is, that your parents are always going to be there for you. And so you begin to perceive the world in a very black and white way. And year after year, the more that becomes ingrained, the more that you see things in more black and white, the more routine it gets and the harder it is to break it. That's why they say, it's easier for kids to learn a second or third language when they're younger than it is when they're, 19, 20 and onwards, because your brain is developing, and that's where you learn a lot of these behaviors and thought patterns. So if you're not emotionally nurtured and you're not emotionally safe, and on top of that, people invalidate your feelings, then you become very rigid in your thinking, and you don't get to experience the types of maturity that other children may. So, and of course, because if you're like me, you grew up in a traumatic, chaotic, abusive environment. Your parents neglected you, or they had their own problems, or they weren't there for you. Whatever the case may be, you didn't have that guidance, right? And so I've often likened my development over the last 20 years into kind of re-parenting myself. By going to these classes, by going to therapy, you're learning how to become a matured individual. And so this is kind of how I believe that black and white thinking really gets ingrained, And as a result of coming out of a chaotic environment, you want a very structured, rigid environment, Maybe you even go to the extreme and you have OCD-like behaviors. So types of black and white thinking are, my friend pissed me off, I don't want to talk to them again. They haven't answered my texts in 2 hours, they must be pissed off at me. She never replied to my text at all, I guess she's mad at me. I wasn't able to qualify for buying a house today, I will never be able to qualify for buying a house, right? It's either or. It's this or that. When you are in grayscale thinking, the things that you can begin to see are this and or buts, right? Not now, maybe later. It's happening right now, but it won't happen all of the time, right? My boyfriend's mad at me right now, but he's going to take some time to calm down. In a few days, we can talk again. My friend didn't answer my text now. That's not like her. I don't have any reason to think that she's upset with me. I'll try her again tomorrow, right? I didn't get to purchase a house this round, but I'm really going to try next time to buy a house next time. So these are some of the ways that you can look into grayscale thinking to kind of break that black and white thinking. And it's difficult, The ways for you to break black and white thinking are to keep these mantras in mind. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's happening right now. I don't know that for a fact. Telling yourself, my brain wants to split into the black and white because it's a comfortable place for me to go. And sitting with the ambiguity of not knowing right now, which is the gray zone, is difficult. But I promise you, if you try to replace these no's and yeses with maybes and laters, you're going to really begin to break out of that black and white thinking, and you're going to see an improvement in your relationships. You'll see a decrease in the anxiety levels, and things will get better for you. Aiming for that gray zone. Okay, words to avoid. Always, never, you always do this. Ought, must, should. These are all words that just don't help get you into grayscale thinking. But saying mantras like, I'm not sure, or maybe later, or I don't have all of the facts, those are ways that you can get into grayscaled, matured thinking that can help you out of this type of behavior. My name's Jen. You've been watching BPD Woman. Please share your comments below. And until I see you next time, please be effective. Bye-bye.